So I want to make a quick video to explain how do we know God exists and why does it matter if you believe it or not? How does it change your life and will it make the world a better place? It will, is the answer. But let me explain. So whatever I'm going to say is simple, logical, and like truth does, it resonates with your heart. There's something within you that says that's the truth, if you're honest with yourself. Here we go. So because it's so simple, I can actually say everything I need to say in like 3 sentences, and it goes something like this: simple probabilities show God exists. And God promises to answer your calls. So God's not dead. He doesn't depend on you simply looking at evidence and saying God should exist. God does exist because God is alive and proves his existence to you in a personal way for all those people who are honest about searching for God. And the third point that I'm going to go into is that if you forget God, you'll forget your own soul, and that's the experience of a lot of societies that have decided God does not exist and they don't care about God, and the result is a lot of depression, a lot of disillusionment with their own lives, a lot of detachment from nature and their own souls and the people around them. If you compare that with somewhere like here, where people are a lot closer to each other, everybody says, I'm your brother, I'm your sister, and stuff like that. So people are very relaxed with each other. They're not worried about making eye contact, or they just talk to each other really easily. Anyway, so let me go into those 3 points quickly. Simple probabilities show God exists. When I was a kid, I used to do this. I used to look at my finger and say to myself, like, imagine I was a robot, because we kind of are, right? But really super high-tech robots, more than we can imagine. And I used to think I'm a robot, but one amazing robot. That was my way of reflecting on my own existence. And if we think about how complicated we are, the honest way to the honest result of that thinking should lead to the fact that there is a God. If we saw a bunch of robots walking down the street, and every day we see the most high-tech robots, be they human beings or dogs or cats, they are so high-tech that a single tiny microscopic bit of you is more complex than any robot we've made. So a whole human being we're in denial if we say God does not exist. We're fighting truth, and when you fight truth, well, they say that truth will free you. So if you fight truth, you're living in a prison of your own very limited ideology. Not just your limited ideology, it will really limit the way you live your life. So, yeah. And simple probabilities show that God exists, but not just looking at yourself and other creatures Look at the way our lives are pathetic, feeble lives are preserved by the clouds and the atmosphere and the delicate environment that we live in on this planet, and a perfect distance away from the sun. Our planet doesn't even go in an elliptical orbit where we go further away and close, and we go in a circle. It's amazing. It's so impossible. Everything happens in such an impossible way to preserve our lives, never mind making us exist in the first place. Now let me clear a few things and some misunderstandings that that people have about religious people. For example, we don't believe in science. No, we believe in science. Science does not deny God. In fact, the more you study science, the more you, if you're honest, believe in God. Evolution does not deny God's existence. Evolution is just a process by which things are created, by which God created things. God doesn't kind of have a hand and come down and make stuff like Lego, because that would be, God made this world to us, for us to have a chance to decide we're going to be honest and believe in God. But if God was not subtle like God is and made himself completely obvious, then we wouldn't have a choice to believe in God or not. So God uses things like evolution. Now some people say evolution is a process of accidents, of trial and improvement, created by the forces of nature, well, there's definitely by the forces of nature, but not like the way some people claim, ridiculously claim. They claim that evolution creates things by disease and destruction, and the things that survive are the bits that work. You can't make a robot by smashing up lots of stuff, and the stuff that survives is the bit that the robot that will work. That's just ridiculous. It's a stupid idea, yeah? But because it's said so much, where by people in supposedly respectable scientific people, people start believing it because it's said so much. If you repeat something enough, people end up believing in it. So yeah. Assalamu alaikum. Let me just move this. Thank you. Shukran. So we're just coming into the house. Anyway, so that's, God must exist if we're honest with ourselves. But the thing I want to say after that is, we don't want to just simply look at the evidence and think, oh, God must exist. That's a very sort of hollow... One second, let me close the door. That's kind of like a hollow and empty belief in a dead God. And if you look at the scriptures of all these different religions, they talk about a living God that helps you. So I can talk about Islam specifically, and in the Islamic scripture, the Quran, it's the word of God, and God challenges everybody out there and says, if you want to know I exist, ask me, I'll tell you. So awesome. I've done that. I used to be an atheist, and I suppose I could quickly tell you my story, part of my story. I was convinced God did not exist, and nobody could prove to me God existed. And but then I said to God one day, I think I was at a station or something, Waterloo Station, and I said, I'm going to be humble for a minute. Really try to, like, so humble as to say, you know what? I'm going to say, God, I'm talking to you, God, if you're there, maybe you exist. Help me. show me you exist. And this is my specific story. You're not supposed to believe it, but I'm saying God teaches, shows his existence in his own way. So for me, when I said that, in no time, immediately something happened in my brain, and I believed in God, and I was so convinced that God existed that nobody could convince me otherwise. It became so apparent and obvious. That's part of my story, but anyway. So God exists, and God is alive. You don't just have to depend on evidence, but that God creates the evidence so that you have a reason to ask God. Yeah, it's not a ridiculous thing to ask God, because all the evidence is in front of you every day. It's not complicated, it's simple. You don't even have to be a scientist, you just have to reflect on your own existence, and you'll know God must exist. Then you ask God. So that's that. But then why does it all matter, and why am I bothering telling you? Because I know it's important for you, for your own happiness, and for a better world, for everybody's happiness. Why is that? Because if you forget God, you'll forget your own soul. When you forget God, you start fighting truth, because I've already shown you. The honest thing is to believe in God. But not only that, I mean, when you start fighting truth, that's a downhill path. They say the truth will free you. So if you're fighting truth, you're putting yourself in shackles. And but God, you have to remember, God does not need you. All these religions, and I believe all religions come from one source. They're all connected. Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Buddhism I consider a religion, even though they market themselves as not being a religion, Hinduism, etc. And all sorts of Aboriginal and South American and whatever religions, they're all connected and come from God. And that's another chat between us, maybe another time. But God creates these religions for your benefit. When God asks you to worship him, it's for your benefit. God, like we're learning now that meditation is really important, but also thankfulness is really important, and that's where we're beginning to relearn these old truths. So if God creates you and does lots of stuff, if you're thankful to God, you start being thankful to human beings and stuff like this, all for your own benefit. We're completely insignificant to God. God does not need us to pray to God. I'm trying to avoid using the word him, because people think that God is a him, but there's a reason behind the word we use him, but why we use the word him. But anyway, although in the Quran, just so people don't think the Quran is a sexist belief, God's greatest attributes are feminine, like Rahman Rahim, the gracious and merciful. Rahman comes from the word Rahim, which means the womb, because God nurtures you. Anyway, so you need God, and you need God in lots of ways. And when you don't listen to God, you start doing all sorts of really destructive things to yourself. You forget your soul, you forget your own feelings, because your soul is the true bit of you, not this physical stuff that doesn't really represent you. Yeah, your soul is what keeps you up at night when you do bad stuff. It's where your conscience lies. Somewhere in this being, this physical being, there's a spiritual being connected to it. And when you forget your soul, you are in trouble. You start destroying yourself. You have this empty hole within you, and you start trying to fill it with materialistic things, and it doesn't happen. Then you start filling it with drugs, and that certainly doesn't help you. And then you start, when you're not at peace with yourself, you're not at peace with your environment. You're not going to be at peace with your parents, your family, your friends, your society, and people become disconnected, as we see in the West. Yeah, because when we left God, we left or became disconnected with God from our soul. And then we became disconnected with our environment in every sense, including people and nature. And then we started consuming more and more from nature in a destructive and uncaring way, because we were so disconnected from ourselves and our own feelings and our own soul that we lost any sense of what's good for us and what's good for the world. People in many parts of the world, like where I'm, we're a lot more connected with nature because we're just more at peace with ourselves. We live very simple lives. Anyway, my words, I actually steal them from scriptural stuff, and I much rather say it from the source. Beautiful, beautiful stuff from the Quran, for example. So something I feel is really relevant. When I was from an atheist background, I just feel it's so right. I'm going to say it. There's the kind of stuff you have to reflect on. That's why I didn't really start with this, because people don't have the habit of reflecting. So maybe you will. So enjoy. O people, remember the favour of Allah. That's the name of God. Yeah, and actually, it's actually the name of God in many religions: Christianity, Judaism, Islam, whatever. So, O people, remember the favour of Allah towards you. Is there any creator other than Allah who provides for you from the heaven and earth? So heaven, the atmosphere, the clouds and stuff. There is none worthy of worship but He. Why then are you turned away? And if they reject you, talking to messengers of God and all the people who pass on God's messages, surely God's messengers have been rejected before you, and to Allah all things are brought back for decision. So God is the judge at the end of the day. So if you believe the truth or not, at the end of the day it will come back to God. O people, surely the promise of Allah is true. So let not the present life deceive you, nor let the deceiver deceive you with respect to Allah. Surely Satan is an enemy to you, so take him as an enemy. He calls his followers only that they may become inmates of the burning fire. For those who disbelieve there is a severe punishment, and for those who believe and do good works there is forgiveness and a great reward. Is he then to whom the evil of his deed is made to appear pleasing, so that he looks upon it as good, like him who believes and does good deeds? Surely Allah judges astray whom He will, and guides whom He will. So let not thy soul waste away worrying for them, talking to the messenger of God, Prophet Muhammad, and all his followers who worry for humanity. Don't destroy yourself worrying for humanity, because, as God continues, surely Allah knows what they do, the people who fight the truth or don't listen to the message of God. And Allah it is who sends the winds which raise the clouds. Then do we drive them to a lifeless tract of land and quicken it, or bring it back to life after its death. Likewise shall the resurrection be. I thought that was awesome, but hey, I kind of maybe read it really bad because I was kind of explaining on the way, but send me your comments. I love to answer them. I'm always checking the comments. If you don't agree with something, I'll give you an answer to it. Thank you for listening anyway.